Hey, so I'm going to do my best to start off where I left off last time, which is rebuilding this switch component that um, that I've already built once, but I'm changing the syntax for it, and I decided to rebuild it just to simplify how the code's working. So the last time I went through it, I wrote down this documentation for it, saying step by step what it should do. And then I use those documentation strings to create my ideal kind of process for getting this data and transforming it one at a time. And I can just show you real quick what the syntax is that we're aiming for. So first of all, we want an element, so like a div element, to have this data switches attribute, and this is going to name the switches. So for example, switch name and switch name 2 are both the names of the switches, and then in parentheses are the arguments that are passed into them. Auto stands for whether the switch is going to auto close or not when you click in a different area on the page. And the custom active switch name lets you apply a custom name to the switch whenever it's activated. The actions are on or off, or toggle, which, if it's on, then it's going to turn it off. If it's off, it's going to turn it on. And then a context. And although the action is required, the context isn't. It's just where the action is going to look for the switch that it's going to turn on or off. So the element with the data switches attribute is the switch that it's looking for, and the actions is the trigger element. So probably like a button or a link or something like that that's going to enable the switch or not. The data switch stop attribute lets you list a bunch of switch names separated by spaces that will make it so that if you click on an element with this attribute, it's going to prevent any actions from being triggered on that element. So you might want to use this if, for example, the switch that you're triggering is has a trigger inside of it, but then there's a certain area that you don't want it to affect. So like, for example, say you have like a popover. So like, okay, I can show an example. But yeah, no, just like say you have a little dialog box that pops up and you have a close button in the dialog box. If you click outside of the dialog box, you want it to automatically close, right? So that's just going to be auto. That argument is going to be auto. But then inside of the widget itself, you don't want it to automatically close. So for the widget itself, you would put a data switch stop attribute on that. And then DataSwitchOn switch name is going to tell us that the switch name widget is switched on. And actually, I was thinking about this. So in the original switch library, which I called widget.js, after I go through all of the actions, all of the prevent actions and trigger actions, at the very end, I have this function called auto deactivate activated widgets. And I take all of the actions that were triggered and all of the actions that were prevented, and I loop through all of the widgets on the page. So I get everything. So I used to get all of the switches or widgets with this class called this class that was just W. And I've switched over to this much better syntax of data-switches, which is much more like explanatory, and also it's not going to overlap with another like helper class. So I didn't really like using .w, but it was the first version of the library. So anyways, I get all of the widgets on the page. I parse all of them, so I get all of the widget info from them. So that's their ID or their name, you could say, their active class, and whether they're supposed to be auto deactivated, and whether they're already active. And that's a lot of work to do. So I get all of the widgets on the page, and then I loop through all of them. I see if their auto deactivate is false. If it is, I skip them. I see if they're already active. If it is, I skip them. And then I loop through all of the actions that were just triggered. And if the widget ID that we're looping over is in the triggered actions, I skip over it, and if it's in the prevented actions, I skip over it. And this requires going through, it could be, yeah, almost all of the actions multiple times here, and then it does require going through all of the widgets again after just getting their info. And it turns out, like, so if you just have like 30 or 40 widgets on the page, or switches on the page, it's not really going to, this isn't really going to take that much work. It's probably going to still be under 100 milliseconds, even if you have like 100 widgets on the page. So it's not that expensive, but for a site that I want the possibility of having as many widgets as I want, as many switches as I want, maybe 500, and I want it to be, ideally under 50 milliseconds to process all of them. I think having a better syntax would help with this. So right now, what I would have to do is the same way I'm getting all of the widgets on the page, I would have to get all of the data dash switches on the page. And then I would have to see like what, are they switched on or not. And I think that since, I don't want switches that are not active, and I don't want switches, or yeah, I don't want switches that are not active. So really what I want to do is search for the ones that are active, right? And this attribute here makes it a little bit difficult to do that. So like if I just take this out a little bit and I say, okay, so like this is another example, or like, I don't know, I could have like example switch name. So like these are two attributes that might be attached to a single div. So we might have like a div, and then that div would have this attribute, and we can just say like it's equal to nothing. We could also just like have it on there without it being equal to an empty string. But just for clarity, we'll just have that. So in order to look for whether a switch is turned on, we would have to look for, like, we can't get it by this, right? Because there's no like query selector for like data dash switched on dash star, right? What we can do is we can use like a wildcard selector to get different values for, the attribute that it's equal to. So if this is like equal to ASD, we could say data dash switched on name star equals, and then the ASD, right? So we could get the wildcard for this value, and this ASD value would match this because it's part of this string, because we're using the wildcard selector. But there's no way of saying, I want an attribute that starts with this and may or may not include something else. So there's, like, as far as I know, there's no way of doing that. I don't think there's any way of doing that. We would have to loop through every data switches attribute and see and then loop through all of the attributes and then see if we can match that attribute with this string to see if it was switched on. So what I was thinking about instead is what if we have data dash switched on and then we have like the same we have the same syntax as the data switch stop. So then we could do it like that, and then what that would allow us to do is search for this attribute. And then I guess what we'd have to do in that case is if these were switched off, if they were both switched off, we would want to remove the attribute altogether. So like say we have this div, and then, you know, I have a reference to it. So it's like, you know, lm equals that div, right? Then when we do, you know, switch off on lm, we would have to remove the attribute. So I think that, you know, that's something like lm, I think it's just remove attribute. I'm not sure, but I know it's possible. So we would do that. And then that, if, you know, if switch off, oh shoot. Okay, so here's another thing. This is annoying. Oh no, okay. So for the switch, we have the name. So what I'm worried about now is that my switch off method might need another argument telling it like which switch to switch off or which switch name, but I might already have that. So I have the action, I have the target switch data, and then the target switch data has the switch. So this is the, I'm going to say target switch because that was confusing for a second. So let's get all of those. And then turn off, ideally, is going to check. So switch off is going to check. It's going to say, okay, if lm like get attribute, or no, yeah, I mean, it's just going to have to check afterwards, you know, does it have any more switch on attributes? So if lm has switched on switch, this is a really bad name, but like if it has at least one, then we're not going to remove the attribute. But if it doesn't have any, right, so if both of these have been switched off, and so it would look like this, we'll remove this attribute altogether, right? So that when we search for, when we do like a query selector all, or yeah, document query selector all on this, we know that it's turned on, right? So this is definitely turned on, this switch, right? Okay. So like when I was thinking about this last night, it felt better than it feels now. Right now it's not really, it's still pretty good, right? Because now I'm not going to have to get, like in the original, I'm not going to have to get all of the switches. I just get the ones that are switched on. So that's nice. And then I can check, I still have to get all their data, right? And see if the auto deactivate is false. If it's false, I'm going to just skip it. And then I still have to loop through all the triggered actions and all the prevented actions. What I think I can do is I can union these two, the triggered actions and the prevented actions, so I can like concatenate those arrays. And then I can see the difference between the widget elements and the action elements, the IDs there. So I think, let's see, Lodash probably has something like that. Let's see. And it's probably like more efficient than looping through. I mean, some is nice because you're not going to loop through all of them, right? Once you get to the match, it knows that it has some, so it's not going to go through, it's going to stop the loop at that point. But I think difference, array values. Okay, so we want collection. Okay, let's see, like collection, overlap, and I think underscore is more popular than Lodash. Okay, so I think what I can do is get the, oh man, it's not that complicated. I want to loop through all of them. So the thing about this is that I'm probably not gonna have that many elements, right? And I'm just getting the active ones on the page. I'm just getting the active ones on the page. So there's probably only going to be like 5 or 10. And then to loop through all of the triggered actions and all of the prevented actions, make sure they weren't in them, and then deactivate the rest. I don't know. Something doesn't seem right about that. So if you're curious, the reason why I'm filtering out okay, so like, let's say I have like 5 widgets, and these are their IDs. These wouldn't be their IDs, but let's say these are their IDs. And let's say like we have 1, 2, 3, and 4, and these are all active. Okay, and then 5 is not. And then let's say, like 2, or no, sorry. So let's say these are all not. And then let's say we activate 3, 4, and 5, right, using a click. So in that click, we don't want to deactivate any of these because they were just activated by that click. And then if any actions were stopped, So the whole point of this, so I'm gonna delete this for now. So the whole point of this stop syntax is to prevent any actions from happening on these. So it's just kind of like a catch-all. It's like, okay, so like this area is a nothing zone for this widget. Everything for this switch is swallowed up into this black hole. If you click on an element that has a stop element, that's a lower ancestor than the action element. So so if you have like, action, on, and then you have action stop, and then you have, so then you would want the widget, the switch, to turn on. But if you have action stop, and then you have action on, and then you would want the switch to do nothing. So if it's on, it's on. If on, stay on. If off, stay off. Right? So it's just kind of this like black hole where you don't have to worry about anything. And this was after like a lot of thinking about it, because at first I was like, should it just prevent deactivating it? Should it just prevent activating it? Should I have two different stops, one for preventing activation and one for preventing deactivation? And it turned out that this stop just that covers everything. Just works better. Like it's simpler to think about for me. I don't need a more advanced syntax for it, so it's less to process. And it covers all of my bases for now. So usually that's enough to make it, worth implementing. Okay, so I don't know. I think I kind of covered that. So let's, so I'm going to open up this extra thing. I'm going to say, let's make sure, so on switch off, make sure to remove data switched on attribute if no switch is on for this element. Okay. Or I should say when switch off. Okay. And I'll just make it clear that this is a function. Okay. So that's one thing we wanted to do. The other thing is when auto deactivate activated widgets, grab elements with attribute, not all switch elements. Okay. And is there anything else? I don't think so. Oh, and the other thing that is nice about this DataSwitchOn syntax is that, like I was mentioning earlier, with the attribute selector in CSS, so if we do like document query selector all, so this is actually kind of nice. We can have data switched on, and then we can't do like switch name right here, right? Because this isn't going to match this, because this has more than just this switch name, so it's not an exact match. But we can do this one, I think. So this one, I think, means that this attribute is somewhere in there, and it's part of a space-separated list of attributes. So that's pretty sweet. We could also do this. The problem with this is that if we have this, so we have switch name 2 in there, it's going to match that too, because switch name is in there, right? It's part of it. So we would get some false positives, and we'd have to filter through those to make sure they're exact matches afterwards. But using this syntax with the, I don't know what that is called, but yeah, using that, we don't have to. Okay, so let us start implementing this. Oops, okay, so we got the original. And I'll go through the original afterwards to make sure all of the functionality that's in here is being covered by the new version. But yeah, I like where the new version is going in terms of the how easy it is to understand. The original is pretty easy to understand, but I think this one's a little bit better. Okay, so get action elements from parents. Okay. Let's call this parent elements, and let's shorten elements. Okay, so we got this, and we've got an element, and we're going to search through all of this. We're going to search through this element and all of the parent elements for to see if it is a action element, an action switch, or a stop switch. So we've got this one and this one. Right? I think so. And you can see in the original, we're doing the same thing. We were using classes back here. So we were passing in a second argument to GetParents. And yeah, so I'm going to look at GetParents real quick. So if I look in DOM utilities, so element, as long as the element isn't equal to the document, and the element is going to, and after the first loop, the element is going to be set to the element's parent node. So I believe, I'm not sure. I think that got, okay, let me see. So so this section happens to initialize it. This second section happens after the loop. After, because it's the check. Or no, it happens before, right? Yeah, it's going to happen before. So it happens before every loop. And then this one happens afterwards. So this happens before, but it's not setting anything. So yeah, I think this should get the current element that you pass into. But let's make sure. So let's go to here. Let's, I guess we can call it on the header. GetParents, and let's do GetParents, and we'll just use the current element. Okay. So it's not accurate because it says GetParents and it's getting the current element too. I don't know. I do care about that, but not really. Okay. Get an element's parents. This is bad. And the element itself. I don't know. I'm not distributing this, so I feel kind of okay about it. Well, let's see. So there's this website you might not need. jQuery. I'm going to pause just for 1 second. Okay, so I'm going to type in parent parents. So we have parent node. I just want to see if there's any like excuse for me using GetParents to return the current element too. You know what? I think it's not a good idea. I don't know. I feel like it's not a good idea. But I use it in other places. That's the problem. So this is the main problem building up code for yourself. Is that sometimes you end up with these functions that say something and they don't do exactly what they say. But you have too much code that relies on them. So you can't just remove them, right? Or like change them. I can't just like, if I just change this right now, I don't know if, like, I'm sure I'm only using it like 2 or 3 other places, but I don't really want to check on that right now. And like it could be, it's like in other projects too. I guess I could check on it. I mean, it mostly would just be here. So if I do like get parents, searching a lot of files for get parents. And of course I'm checking node modules too. So it's, yeah, it's in the widget library. Of course it's in the bundle. Okay, and then there, and then there. Yeah, so I think it's mostly just right here. Okay, so what we could do is change this to just get the parents and then we would just add the target element in there. So let's see. I want to search get parents plain JavaScript. Get all parents. Okay. Oh yeah, yeah. Yeah, so why does this guy put the current element in there too? Element parent node. That's so silly. Ay, ay, ay. And this guy. Oh yeah, I think this is where I got it. And yeah, he filters it by a selector too. Get the closest. So yeah, I think he puts the first element in there too. So let's see. I think, yeah, he does, right? Because it's the same thing. Yeah, so that's where I must have gotten it from. Is it so bad that the current element is going to be the first one? It's convenient in this case, so I kind of want to leave it in there, but I want to be explicit about what the code is doing. So what I'm going to do is, ooh, that is hard. No, it's not, right? So all I have to do is say this here, and then it's going to check this before it runs through it, right? So it's not going to get document if it is already there. And then it's going to do that afterwards. So that should solve it. So if I just do that, let's test it out. Yeah, you can see how robust my tests are. Okay, so if I do get parents. Oh, I already had it in there. Okay. Yep. So now it's getting it right, and I feel better about it. Okay. So now if we wanted to, we could have like an additional argument here that would be like, include current element. But I'm not going to have that because I think that's silly. So GetParents, let's see. So we got get action elements from parent elements. So the first thing we're going to do is parent elements. And we're going to do get parents and on the element. So now we have the parent elements. And then we're going to so now I want to add the I want to add the current element to it. I know this seems silly. It really does. So if I do unshift on this, and I put in that, no, because that changes it, and so if I just assign it to A, it's not gonna, yeah, it's just gonna return 3. Okay, so we need the parents first, and then we're gonna do like parents unshift that, and then we'll see what parents is. So now we have the current element in there. Okay, so we're going to do parent elements, unshift element, and now it's going to be the first one. And now we have, this is so silly, but at least it's exact, I guess. Yeah. Okay. So now we're going to do parent elements. So now we have all the elements we need. And this is not exactly what we want, right? Get action elements from parent elements. So from, I think it's like target and parents. Let's just say that, right? Because that's more exact. Okay, so now we're going to say, I'm just naming it this way because I can't think of anything better right now. So target and parents. And I'm just reassigning it so that it's clear what it is. And I wish there was an easier way of doing this. I think there is. Like, I think what I can do is like lm, and then it's like concat, right? And I think concat in JavaScript will return a new array, but I think it's a tiny bit expensive. Yeah, so it's going to return the new array. So I could do that. And that's so much prettier than this. And then I could just say target and parents. That feels, I mean, it's not, I think it's slightly less performant, maybe? I'm not sure, but I like it better. So I'm going to do that. And let's, I guess, test it. Not that I don't think it should work, it's just I make all kinds of simple mistakes if I don't at least just like run it once. Okay, so that looks like it's working. Okay, so that's cool. Okay, so target and parents. We've got the the elements we need, and now we want to get the action elements. Oh, got it. Okay. So we just want the ones that have stop and so this attribute and this attribute. So that's pretty cool because we, in our GetParents, so yeah, this is getting stupidly long, like a stupidly long line, but that's okay. So we're going to do that and that. And if you didn't know, this is pretty cool. So on a selector, like document query selector all selector, you can have a comma right in the middle, just like in jQuery. And it's going to search on this and on this. And what we're using here is matches. So matches is this cool, I think it's like an ES5 thing. So you should have a polyfill for older browsers, but it's basically just going to, like as it loops through an elements, it's going to make sure that it, you know, matches the selector. So this is, I think this is pretty much it. Get action elements from target and parents. So I think target and parents, we're not, this isn't even the target and parents anymore. It's now the action elements. So let's say action elements, and let's return that. And I think, you know, what we could do here is just return that, right? But if you think about it, it's a tiny bit harder to read. I don't know. I mean, yeah, I think this is, I like it a little bit more. And that's all that matters, right? Because it's my code. Okay, so we're getting the parents. We're filtering it by these two, making sure they have these two attributes, one of these two attributes on them. And we're including, oh shoot. Yeah. Okay. So, we're not checking the current element to see if it has either of those on it. Okay. So we need to do that. So that's, I think that's why I like that it was in here. Oh, it's so much simpler if it's just in here, right? Isn't it? It's so much simpler. Then it's just like, we don't need any of this other baggage. So now I'm really tempted to just be like, include current element, or like, yeah, include I don't know, include current element, include whatever, right? And then I could just say, you know, if we're not including the current element, then we'll set it right to the parent node. And if not, we're going to do it the old way and we're going to include the current element. And then we need to include a selector in that case, which is annoying, right? So then we need either one of these. I could like pass it in like that, and then I would let this default to false, right? Because it would be undefined, and then this would also default to false. This would be undefined. I'm on the edge of my seat trying to decide this. So the other option is to do it in here. So I can just see if the element matches. And yeah, but it's like 2 or 3 extra lines, especially to make it clear. I'm also really not liking how unclear this line is, like even just as it is. Okay, so get parents, and we can pass in that stuff. I like this. I think this is, it's okay. And I would like to shorten this name. Include current element, include, It's a pretty nice name. GetParents. Include current element. It's fine. Okay, so yeah, that's fine. Okay, so I'm going to save that, and we're going to say GetParents of element, and now we're going to pass in an object, and it's going to be that, and I think the second argument is selector. Sorry, where was I? Selector, yep, and then include current element. So yeah, this actually leads to much nicer code. So we can do let selector equal that, and then we don't have to have the other side of that, and then we can do include current element. And close the braces. Oh yeah, and we need to set this to true. Okay. So that should be it. Action elements. We have the selector. We can even call this like actions selector. Oh, no we can't. We could, but I think this is fine. Okay. And then we got that element. Okay, cool, cool, cool. And I just lucked out that I decided to call them both elem. Okay, so that works for that. So now we have all the action elements. Unfiltered actions data. Okay, so we want get actions data. So this is a fun one. This is definitely one I was looking forward to. So we're going to have the action elements, and I think that's what I call it up here, right? Because that makes sense. And what we want to return, so let's just write this return statement down here. What do we want to return? We want to return an array of objects, and we want it to be like, I think we include it, we have it up here somewhere, right? So we want the name, the type, and the context. And let's look at our list real quick, our list of widgets. So for the actions, we have the name of the switch, the action, and then we have the context. And for stop, the action is going to be stop, or the type, sorry. The type is going to be stop, and the name is going to be switch, and it's not going to have a context. Ooh, should it? Ooh, I think it should. Should have a context? No, I don't think so. Okay, so on the fly, just making major decisions. So we're going to take this here, and we're going to say that's what we're going to return, is a bunch of these. Okay, so an array of these. I guess having full cylinder is fine. Okay, so we want to get the name, the type, and the context. So this is cool, because what I did is I created this this helper called Parse Data Attributes. And this I'm actually very, 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 very proud of, even though it's probably not that impressive. But for me, it is. It's super impressive. So what I did is I created this make parse function, which takes a bunch of strings a bunch of strings, and it parses. So yeah, it just parses these. So like if you see this string, right? So you have the switch name, you have whether it's auto or not, you have the custom active switch name, and then you have another switch name. So it will, so basically you pass into this function over here, make parse function, like name, auto, and context, right? Which you can see right here as an example. And it's going to give you back a function that's going to parse exactly this syntax with the name and then in parentheses the additional arguments and then another name and additional arguments and make sure that those line up with each other. So it's going to know the first thing, the first part is equal to the name, the second part is equal to auto, and the third part is equal to, well, okay, for this one it would be context, and then for this one it would be custom active switch name. So, yeah. So that's the example I'm using here is the actions. Okay, and the way it does that is actually pretty cool. So first it removes all the, so I'm going to just show you real quick because I'm really proud of this. So the first way I did it is using a regular expression, but if you have used regular expressions before, you feel super smart at first. It's just a fact. You just you build a regular expression, you test it, it doesn't work, you test it again, it doesn't work, you test it the third time, it works, but it seems fragile, and then you work on it a little bit more, finally it works for all the use cases you want it, you put it through a dozen different tests, and it's working, and it's not turning up, as many false positives as it did before. And it's this kind of dark path because what you end up with is a slightly complicated string. Actually, it's super complicated because it's not complicated when you're in it, just like most programming. And then later you come back to it and you're like, what did I create? And so if you can, what you want to do is avoid regular expressions because it makes adding functionality, functionality to this particular feature a lot easier in the future because you're not going to have to parse through it. You're not going to have to run all those additional tests in the future. So, okay, anyways, at first I had a regular expression that was match on a word or a dash, and then look for a parentheses, and then match up to the closing parentheses if it's there, but the second parentheses part is optional. And what I changed it into was, okay, go through the string, remove a bunch of extra white space, right? So if we have a bunch of white space here for some reason, right? Because I want to take it easy on myself in the future. If I end up typing in a bunch of extra white space in the attribute name, I want to be like, hey, dude, that's no problem, right? So I'm gonna remove all the extra white space, and what it does, it's kind of cool. So it removes. Oh, and I have to check on this because I'm not positive that I do this. So okay, first of all, it replaces all of the multiple white spaces with one white space. So it's going to get it down to here, right? And it's going to have a white space at the end. And then I think, so the thing I'm not sure about is do I do the trim now, or did I do it before? Because if I did it before, oh, it's not going to matter. It doesn't matter if I it doesn't matter if I did the trim before or not. Because either way, there's going to be, yeah, okay. Perfect. So we're going to get down to this, right? But you'll notice we have white space separating the major sections, and we might have an extra white space in here, right, for some reason, and we have a white space here. So it's not ready for quick and easy parsing yet. Using just regular string methods. But what we can do, what I did, is I split up the letters in this attribute into an array. So it was the first part was S, then W, then I, then T, then C, then H, then N, then A, then M, then E, then open paren, then A, then U, then T. I promise I'm not going to do this forever. And then a space. I just wanted to get to the space. And then C, U. Oh, geez. Okay. So yeah, so this is the array. And what it does is for each letter, it's going to say, hey, are you an open parentheses. Nope. Okay, let's go to the next one. And like, we'll keep you there, okay? And let's go to the next one. Are you in open parentheses? Nope. And it's going to go all the way down here. It's going to say, are you in open parentheses? And it's going to say, yeah, I am in open parentheses. And then it's going to say, okay. So from now on, we're going to remove any spaces from the string. So it's going to say, are you a closed parentheses or a space? And it's going to say no. And then it's going to go all the way down here to the space, and then it's going to be like, boom, so you're a space. We're going to remove you. Okay, well then we're going to keep going, and then we're going to find the closed parentheses, and then since it's closed parentheses, we're going to know that you know, we can stop removing the spaces. So what you end up with is pretty cool. You end up with this situation, boom, and boom. And you might be wondering, well, why is that so cool? Well, the cool thing about it is that with these second arguments, the ones in parentheses, we have an alternate, not an alternate, but we have the way we tell whether they're a separate argument is the comma. We don't care about the space. The space is a human thing. It's something these silly humans do to be able to read it better. But we don't care about it as a you know, parser. So we can remove them from within the parentheses. And then we have a way of parsing the separate sections because we have this empty space here. So now we can split it on the empty space, and now all of a sudden magically we have these two separate strings. And now here's the really cool part. We say, okay, for each of these, we're going, so okay, the important thing to remember is that we might have this as well. So we might not have parentheses after it. So we want to do things that are going to make all of these parse in exactly the same way. So the first thing I do is I remove the closing parentheses because this doesn't have a closing parentheses, so it's not going to worry about it. But these two do. So we're going to do that and that. Then we're going to split the string on the opening parentheses. This doesn't have an opening parentheses. So when it splits the string, all it's going to do is just put this string inside of you know, an array, and that's it. Now with this one, it's going to say, okay, we're going to split the string on the open parentheses, and so that's going to mean that we have these two. And then we're going to do that here too, right? So we have an array with 2 items for both the for both of these, and then we're going to loop through each of these strings. I'm pretty sure this is how I did it. I might have done it a tiny bit more elegantly, but then I'm going to loop through each of these strings, and I'm going to split on the comma, right? So then I end up with, I think I did it slightly more elegantly actually, in reality. But anyways, you end up with these, and so now I can loop through them and I can say, okay, what were the arguments I passed into my make parser function? Were they name, action, and custom active switch name? I'll just say custom switch name for now. And how many do you have? Oh, you only have one, so you only have the name, right? So we're going to say name equals switch name for you, and then for the second one, we're gonna you know, have all three because they're gonna all match up. We're gonna have name, action, and custom switch name. Okay, you get it, right? So I can show you. I'm going to show you the code real quick. So here is where I do the fun part. So I remove the spaces in parentheses. So first of all, I format spaces. So that all that does is it trims the string and replaces all the multiple white spaces with a single white space, like I was talking about. Then I remove the spaces in the parentheses, like I was talking about, right? So in those sub-arguments, I remove all the spaces in there. And then I split the string on the space. And then in the separated param sections, so those are like the two parameter, right? So like you can see it here, right? So we have switch name and switch name 2, right? On those two, we're going to first replace all spaces. So this is a character for space. So I am using a regular expression here. I apologize, but it's a pretty simple one. We're going to replace all spaces or, that's the or character, closing parentheses with nothing. So basically we're going to remove all the spaces and all the closing parentheses. And then we're going to, I actually don't know if the spaces one is necessary because the spaces should all be gone. Although I think I might have like a space at the end of there, right? I'm not sure. So we'll just leave it. And then we're going to split it. Oh, yeah, so I forgot. You can pass a regular expression into the split function. So that's why it's more elegant, is because I'm splitting on opening parentheses or commas. I just think that's so cool. Oh my goodness. I just felt like when 3 years ago you would have done something complicated and then you do something super simple so that it's going to be easier for you in the future, you just like feel brilliant because you're like, wow, I'm really saving myself a lot of time in the future. So anyways, then you end up with this parse switch attributes function, which you can pass in, a bunch of, string arguments or parameters, right? And then you end up with being able to, let's see, so you'll be able to turn a string like this into an array, like this first one. So you can see this is like my simple testing framework, which is just a console log, which says passed or failed. So you so this one matches up with this one matches up with this one, and this one matches up with this one. And you'll notice here, I just like put this in with the dot as like a last minute thought, like, I wonder, if this works or not. And it turned out that it did work, whereas with my regular expression solution, it wouldn't have worked because I wasn't allowing dots to be in there. So I would have had to go back with that solution and added dots to that regex, which is good in a way because you're being very explicit about the code you're allowing and not allowing. But it's not good in the way that, sorry, this is really tripping me up, that this is, usually I use 2 spaces for my indentation, and some of this is formatted with 4 spaces. So it's really getting on my nerves here. Okay, so, so with this like more general solution that's like more flexible and, like I was saying, like makes it easier for me to think through it in the future, it has some nice forgiving surprises where if in the future I wanted to add, you know, more cool things, I wouldn't have to think about them too much because I know that my solution is general enough that it's just looking for the things that are important to it and not, only whitelisting things. Okay, so boom, boom, boom. So now you understand the parse data attributes function. So what we're going to do is go into the switch and we're going to import this. And I think that I am exporting this. Yeah, so I'm exporting parse switch attributes. And I know that the tests are in here too, so they're going to run. I don't care right now. I'm going to separate out the tests later, but I'm just having fun for now. So I'm going to do that, and I'm going to do utils parse data attributes, parse switch attributes, and okay. We got the name, auto, and context. And that's not what I want, right? Because I'm working with, oh geez. So did I misname this? Wait, name, auto, and context. And name type and context, that's not what I want, right? This is name type, actions. Actions, okay, I'm sorry. This is really a problem because I keep mixing up the syntax for actions and the syntax for switches. Okay, anyways, so yeah, so we have the name, the action, and the context. Okay, name, the type of action, and the context. Okay, so this is misnamed. So we want all of these to be called parse switch actions. And I don't care about the attributes part because I'm importing it from a thing called parse data attributes. So parse switch action, I guess. Parse switch action attributes. That's fine. Okay. I mean, it's doing so much, like it can have a big name, right? Okay. So parse switch action attributes. And I'm pretty sure, yeah, name, auto, context. Shit. It's not, is it? No. Auto is up here. That's awful. That's awful. What am I doing? What am I doing with my life? No, honestly. Okay. So parse switch. Let's go back to the old way. The old way was better. Okay, so parse switch attributes. And let's make a new one. This doesn't have context. This has custom switch name. And let's remove that. Okay. Okay. Oh, here. Okay. So now let's do parse switch action attributes. And it's going to be name action, or what we're going to call it. No, we're not going to call it type, are we? Name oh yeah, okay, name type. Type is going to toggle on or off, or it could be action. I like type better. And then for the last one, we're going to have context. Okay, so so we're going to do that, and then we're going to make sure this is, yeah, okay, so that's that. Okay, so there's a slight problem here, which is that, yeah, it's actually a huge problem. It's not really, it's just a disappointing thing. So right now, when we do this, we're going to be parsing both of the action element and the stop element, and they have somewhat similar, somewhat overlapping syntax, right? So like this, if I saw this and someone was like, is this an action attribute? Is it a switched on attribute? You know, is it a data switches attribute? I wouldn't know, right? Because they all have, they can have similar things because they don't need the parentheses with the optional attributes after them, or optional parameters after them. So I'm relying on that and relying on the fact that that stop doesn't have a type, right? All it's going to have is the name. So this is going to work, but it's not going to work because I designed it to work. It's going to work because I'm using the parser for the action attributes for the stop attributes, even though it wasn't built for that. But I don't want to check. I don't want to, yeah, it works, so why not? So, but I could, you know what I should do? Leave a comment here and say, this works for data switch stop, oops, even though it wasn't, even though it's not designed to, I don't know, check the attribute before parsing. If in the future you need to parse this separately, just check the attribute first. Okay. Okay, so we got the action elements. We're parsing, and so now we should end up with something like this, right? Name, switch name. I think we called it type. Oh, this will be quotes. Type, and it could be like toggle, and then context. And I think the only valid value I have right now is parent. Okay, so now we're going to do action. Let action equal that. Get actions data. Oh, dude. Okay. So so this isn't a problem, but it's slightly a problem. So this is going to be an array of these things. And we want to combine it with the other arrays. So what I would love to do is just return this right here, and then I could just map over these, and then I could just return this, right? And you know, you might think if you were me and weren't thinking through the whole thing, that it's gonna put out this flat array. But what it's actually gonna do is give me a bunch of arrays of these objects next to each other. And then I guess what I could do is just flatten them afterwards using a function from Lodash. Or what I could do is reduce, right? So I could reduce and concat. So we'll pass in an array as the first argument. And I don't know why this is called memo some places. Let me see. JS reduce, and let's see. Lodash has a reduce too. Reduce. Oops. It's right here. Reduce collection. Let's see how they use it. Reduce. So they say sum or results. Okay. Results make sense. I think underscore is probably not. Yeah, that's not. Okay. It's like underscore .js. .com? No, .org. Okay. Reduce. I think underscore taught me about memo. Yeah, see they use memo here. The memo, and they say it like it's official. So I think it probably is. Oh, accumulator. Ooh, I love that, because that makes sense. Yeah, let's use accumulator. Firefox, you got it. Okay, so accumulator, and then what's current value? That's a good one too. Thank you, Firefox. Oh, but we should just say action element, shouldn't we? Okay, so action element. So then we're going to, I think sometimes I forget how reduce works, but no, you just return it. So we're just going to return accumulator concat this, right? Because that's going to parse which action attribute is going to return an array. We're going to, so we're going to add it to the empty array, and then we're going to go to the next element, and we're going to add those. And the one thing I want to make sure that we're doing here is keeping everything in order. So I know that concat is definitely going to add it on to the end. I say that, and then I look it up because I'm only pretty sure. Yeah, okay, so it adds it on to the end. Okay. So we start with empty array. We parse the switch actions for the first action element, and the first action element is going to be the element we clicked on, and then its parent, and then its parent, and then its parent. You know, anything with the switch and the stop. So those are going to be in order. Boom. Okay. I just thought of a case that's not going to work. If the stop is on the, so if the data switch stop attribute is on the same, is on an element with the data switch action attribute on it, and they're both targeting the same switch, one might get parsed before the other, right? Just by the order of the subparameters, or no, not the subparameter, the attributes themselves, right? So actions might be before stop, stop might be before actions, and then in that case, we're with this array. So I don't need this anymore. Yeah. So with this, we might end up with stop before it, we might end up with stop after it. In that case, if the stop's before, I want to remove the action after it if it's targeting the same switch. But if it's after it, I don't care. The starting switch should go through. So what I could rely on here, which I think I'm going to rely on here, is that if I have an action and a stop on the same element, I'm stupid. Because why would I ever want to do that? Why? So like if you watched my previous video, the whole point of this switch library is that I'm pushing a button to trigger another some kind of switch thing to open, right? So it's going to be like a dialog or something. If I put an action and a switch on the same element, what do I expect to happen, right? Like, do I just never want that switch to work? Do I never want that trigger to work, right? So like, either I never want that trigger to work, or I want it to work. Oh, it could be that. It could be I want the trigger to work, but I don't want anything above it, or like any of the ancestors, or not ancestors, any of the parents to trigger it. So and like maybe it has a parent right above it that would trigger it. So I need to put it on the same element. Whatever, wrap it in a div and put the stop above it. I'm just gonna say right here, I guess, caveat. I think I'm using that word, right? Yeah, okay, so let's just say warning. If a stop and an action are on the same element and target the same switch, they might get out of order. Just don't put a stop and action on the same element if they target the same switch. No, just do not. Okay, cool. Okay, that's cool. So, you know what's cool? I've always wanted to program like this, and I didn't know how for a very long time. And I'm not saying I am a great programmer. I am just much better than I was. And that feels good. Okay, so next we're going, this is the last section I'm going to do before I call it a night for now. So processed stopped actions, because this is kind of a cool one actually, because I haven't really even thought about how to do this yet. And by the way, I don't know if any of this is going to work, but it's fun thinking through it, and hopefully it works. And if it does, I won't have to, I can, yeah, I mean, I'll just test it a bunch after. But I like building it out all at once for some reason. It's kind of like writing a story and then reading through it later and being like, oh, this part doesn't work, that part doesn't work, and like fixing it. But at least I can kind of work through the whole story first. So what I want to do here, I'm going to have like a bunch of widget IDs, and so it's going to be like, you know, say like 1, 2, 2, 5, 6, 6, 8. And then let's put commas in between these. Oops. And then like this might be a stop. This might be an on. This might be an on. We'll just say they're all ons, right? This might be an on. This might be a stop. And this, let's just say this is an off. Okay. And let's put spaces. So in this case, what I want to happen is for 1 to turn on, or let's say toggle. So 1 to turn off if it's on if it's off. 2 to do nothing, right? Because it's this stop is happening before anything else. So this second one should be filtered out. And then 5 to turn on, 6 to turn on, and then 6 to turn on. Yeah, okay. So 6 to turn on because the stop is after. Sorry, I was just thinking about something else. I was thinking about the context, which I guess I don't need to worry about now. But I think maybe I should, right? Because maybe the context, no. This I already decided the stop doesn't care about context. It stops them no matter what their context is. I might change that in the future, but for now I'm not. Okay, so I know what's going to happen, and the data is going to look like an array of these, except I didn't. So let's say general example. I'm not going to keep this general example. It's just to help me think through it for now. So the problem is I don't have a type. I don't have a type for stop. So what I could do, parse switch actions attribute. So I'm going to get the name, the type, and the context back. Oh, shoot. Wait, huh? Yeah, okay. Oh, sorry, I gotta pause 1 second. Okay, I'm back. Okay, so you know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna take this and I'm gonna say actions equals, oh wait, shoot. Yeah. No, this is good. So this is gonna be this. And oh, I gotta go through all of them. So I gotta go through all of them. I gotta see if it has a type. If it doesn't have a type, I'm gonna say it's a stop. That's annoying. So I could just assume that it's a stop in the later one. Oh man. Or, you know what I could do? I could change the syntax so that this is, so stop doesn't exist, and this is just like this. And then and then I'm setting it up also for having the context thing if I want to add it later. But I probably don't want to, and I kind of like having stop just be separate. So yeah, I think I'm just going to, yeah, it's a little bit messy, it honestly is, but I'm just going to assume that if it doesn't have a type, it's a stop. And that means that if I have data switch actions like that, it's going to assume that this is a stop. And that's not super forgiving to myself. But if I'm testing it out and I'm like, this code isn't working, what's happening? I'm just gonna like look at this switch, this action. I'm gonna be like, oh, I didn't include the action, so obviously that's why it's not doing anything. Right? So I think that's a fine default. Okay, so what I want to do is I want to go through all of the, so what am I getting? I'm getting the unfiltered actions data. So this doesn't need to know that it's unfiltered. So I'm getting actions data. And I don't know how to do this. So I like looking at the general example for this because it's easier to kind of parse. So let's say it's like this. It's just like a string, right? And it's just like to stop. Does that make it easier? I think it doesn't. Okay, so I basically just want to say, I just want to store the stops. And then I want to check to see if the action is inside the stops. And if it is, I want to remove it. And I also kind of want to remove, so this is something that I'm thinking about doing, is if, say, at the end, I have one on, then this one, what does it do, right? So like say the one switch is on, so this toggle is going to turn it off. And then I go through all these, and then I get to the one on. Does it turn it back on? I don't think so. I think whatever one was triggered closest, was triggered first, is the one I want to happen. And I don't want it like switching back and forth, right? Because that makes no sense. Why would I wouldn't want to do that. And I want to be forgiving. Ideally, I don't want to ever run into this situation, where I'm, doing this. But if I do, I want to have the first one take precedence. I think that's, yeah. So I'm thinking, why don't I keep an array of the regular actions and I keep an array of the stopped actions. I check to see, oh, I could just keep one for both of them, right? And then if it's in that array, just don't include it. Okay, so let's do this for let I equal 0, I is less than actions length. Someone told me that like calculating, like getting the length beforehand is a good thing. because then you don't have to like get the length every time. But it adds like another line. And when you, like, I think I'm going to be going through at most like 30 items here. So it's probably like 0.01 milliseconds. I don't think it's worth it. Okay, so I++. And then we're going to keep track of processed actions. Okay, processed actions. And then let's do action equals actions I. And let's do if I think processed actions some I would say current action action name equals current action name. So, and we want if it's not. So if it's not, so if the current action isn't in the processed actions, we're going to add it to the current action. And I think that takes care of it all, right? Because, yeah, so it's only going to keep the first, you know, I might leave this, actually. So 1 toggles, 2 does nothing. 5 turns on, 6 turns on, 8 turns off, and that's it. And that's it. And the last one doesn't fire. Okay. We'll say example data. Okay, so processed actions are the ones that have already gone through this filter. And all we're making sure is that I'm removing any future names that are the same as the old names. Okay, so processed actions, some action name is, oh wait, some, oh man, did I get this wrong? So I think I did. I think I want an exclamation point up here. But let me just see. So some are not, I think this might do the same thing. So, oh, but it's going to go through the whole thing every time if they're all unique, right? Okay, so action, I just want to see if this would work. I'm going to change it to the exclamation point. If the action name is not equal to the name, then include it. I think that would work, yeah. But okay, we want, if it's equal, oh, Yeah. So I think the other way it's going to loop through more, I don't know, it's probably about the same. But we want, if it's not already in there, let's see, I think Lodash has like an includes or something. Checks if value is in collection. If collection is a string, otherwise same value 0 is used for equal. Includes, oh, huh, that's weird. It works for strings. Okay. Contains this value. I don't know. Maybe each map reduce find. Oh, find is what I want. Or maybe? I don't know. I think some does it too, right? Okay. I don't know. I think this works. So if we find it in the processed actions because the name and the name of the current action matches, then don't include it in the processed actions. Otherwise, include it and return it. Cool. Process stopped actions. I think I'm just going to rename this because we're doing a little bit more, and I'm just going to say remove all actions with the same name if they appear after another action with the same name. Remove all actions with the same name as another action that precedes them. Precede, I think. Nope. Precede. Okay. Glad I looked that up. Precede. Okay. Comes before. I learned a new word. Why not use it? Cool. Okay. So that is all for today. We've made it through 3, so now we should. Oh no, oh no, oh no. So, oh wait, and I rename this process actions. So remove all actions that have been stopped, and it wants the stopped actions. So it wants, do I need to split them out though? So action and the context. Oh wait, oh shoot. So I need the stopped actions for later when I'm deactivating. But the only point of the stopped actions for this section is to remove them, is to remove the actual actions. So I didn't do that right, because now I have the actual actions and the stopped actions together. Processed actions. So what I could do is what do we have? I like using just actions here. And then we can do unfiltered actions. Actions and stopped actions. Okay, so this is what I want to return. Okay. And I think that what we're doing right now is fine. We just want, yeah. So I think instead what I'm going to do is return the actions and the process actions, because that's really what we need. And the regular actions are going to be in here, and we're just going to say if action type, right? Because that's how we're telling if it's a stop action. Then we're going to do actions push action. Okay. We're assuming boldly that stopped actions don't have a type because of the way they're parsed. Okay. So then we return actions and process actions. And let's do, just say all to make it clear. And then we'll go up here and we'll say all processed actions. And then that'll be good for that. And then we don't have to put in the both of these. We can just do all process actions in there. Okay. So I think that's better. That was just a little misunderstanding. I should have probably copied this down there into a comment as I was writing. So I'm not sure all this is going to work again. I'm pretty sure it's mostly correct, but you know we'll figure it out as we test this out after we write the rest of this, which should just take one more session. Okay, well, thank you for watching, and I will be on later. Bye. Have a good night.